Hey, Mikey, what do you say we kick off this episode of our new occasional series, If You Aren't Paranoid, You Aren't Paying Attention, with a few conspiracy theory jokes. You ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready for these ones.
So, a giant porn conspiracy has been uncovered. It's run by the Illuminati.
At first, I thought you said a giant corn conspiracy, and I was like, ooh. Sounds interesting.
Make great porn. What do you call a constipated conspiracy theorist?
Oh, I have no idea.
An anti-laxer. And you know, Mikey, I have my own conspiracy theory. The government is spreading false rumors that aluminum foil hats protect your brain from being scanned. Aluminum foil is actually an antenna that allows them to get a better signal.
Ooh.
Welcome, all of my fellow paranoid freak wannabes. It is I, your favorite,
Do you think people want to be a freak? Paranoid?
Yeah, sure, why not?
You think people want to be that?
It makes life more interesting.
I want to be an American idiot. And so it's like, I want to be a paranoid freak wannabe. Okay, carry on. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Your favorite, he ought... No, I want to include what you just said in there. Let's start that paragraph. Welcome, all of my fellow paranoid freak wannabes. It is I, your favorite, he ought to be medicated, co-host, Robin Hohweiler. That's Mr. Robin to you.
Do you want me to say something in there? You're going to have to cut and paste it because I can't recreate that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Like when it happens, it happens. And
welcome to not only episode 29 of this Peering Through the Blinds podcast, known as Mr. Robin's Hood podcast, but the inaugural episode of the new occasional series we're calling If You Aren't Paranoid, You Aren't Paying Attention. We're coming to you digitally from Studio B here at the compound, located just to the, never mind where we're located.
Yeah, because we're paranoid freak wannabes and we don't want to be knowing where we live. Wait.
That's right.
Huh?
You don't need to know, people. And by the way, if you're the dude dressed in the weird purple suit and wearing a wig that looks like the ones worn by the Beastie Boys in the Sabotage music video parked in the black sedan a quarter mile down the road, we see you.
We know you're there.
And we have a pretty good idea of what you're up to.
Maybe.
Government freak. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host.
That'll scare him off.
Yeah, who is a delusional conspiracy theorist that has never met a flu vaccine she liked. My collaborative partner and all-around best pal. You are still my best pal, aren't you?
Well, I'd hope so.
Known throughout...
earlier you forgot who I even was, but it's okay. We're back.
Known throughout the podcasting uni as Mikey F.U. I don't want to do what you tell me on the mic. Mikel Mauree Robinson.
We need to get you some help.
Why? There's nothing wrong with me.
I'm fine.
I'm fine. And at the controls today, we have Cousin Fred and his two main squeezes with whom he shares an underground abode on the north lawn here at the compound. The brutally beneficent babe known for holding the world record for glass-eye target spitting, Magdalene, and her fellow late-night planning conspiracy theories on social media, Waffle House, is coming to Fargo, Oklahoma soon.
We only wish.
The hairdressing hydrologist, Gigi. Together, they spend far too much time spying on my every move with their above-ground periscope while plotting my next step toward an altogether too early demise. So, Mikey, today we're going to be discussing one of the world's worst-kept secrets, namely UVB-76, sometimes called the buzzer, but probably better known as Russian ghost radio. A shortwave radio station that broadcasts in upper sideband mode on the frequency of 4625 kilohertz. It broadcasts a short, monotonous buzz tone, repeating at a rate of approximately 25 tones per minute, 24 hours a day. Sometimes the buzzer signal is interrupted and a voice transmission in Russian takes place. The thing is, this has been going on for nearly 50 years, 24/7.
I bet if you listened to it for just an hour, you would go crazy.
Well, yeah. And that's one of the theories that we're going to talk about, that it's a way for the Russians. They're trying to get in everybody's head and brainwash them. Occasional voice transmissions are a more recent addition and are often just random phrases or sometimes a rundown of first names.
I know, it freaked me out when I read that because my name is Russian, really. I was named after Mikhail Baryshnikov, and that's how he spelled it, but my parents decided that they weren't going to spell it like that. They made it hard.
Okay, that's another podcast episode. No one in the Russian or previous to that, the Soviet government has ever acknowledged its existence or its intended purpose. Its intended purpose, which is where the conspiracy theories are born. Here is the signal being streamed live online as we're recording this. I'm feeling brainwashed.
Yeah, it actually made me think of the song with Missy Elliott, and it's like, it's like, gonna lose my, or wait, is that how it goes? Lose my mind up in here.
Oh,
you know, I'm gonna lose my mind up in here.
Yeah.
Up in here, up in here.
It's funny you mentioned that because I do have a recording that somebody was transmitting across that band, and it has, so what it is, they were transmitting, they were hijackers, tried to hijack the frequency, and they were playing clips of a song called Drugs by Sonic Mind. I'm not sure I'd ever heard of that, but anyway.
I don't know. I feel like I have, but...
Well, I'll play it here. I'll play it right now.
Yeah, play it right now. Your table looks like there's little Christmas trees on it. See, like little Christmas trees. Look at all these little Christmas trees.
Yeah, you can't really make out the tune.
It sounds like a song named Drugs.
Okay. So before we deep dive into this, I think we should give a very brief overview of what shortwave is and isn't.
There you go. Good idea.
It's not really as common knowledge as it used to be, with satellite communications and, of course, ubiquitous broadband internet availability. The very idea of transmitting anything over shortwave is something that's probably beyond antiquated. Still, it has applications in war zones, such as the so-called Ukraine-Russo war. Shortwave bands are frequency allocations for use within the shortwave radio spectrum, the upper medium frequency band, and all of the high frequency band. Radio waves in these frequency ranges can be used for very long distance, as in transcontinental communication, because they can reflect off layers of charged particles in the ionosphere and return to Earth beyond the horizon, a practice called skywave or skip propagation. Therefore, short waves directed at an angle into the sky can be reflected back to Earth at great distances. Shortwave radio can be used for communication over very long distances and is used primarily for maritime comms, some commercial aviation, and of course, amateur radio. This in contrast to radio waves of higher frequency, which travel in straight lines, that is, line of sight propagation, and are limited by the visual horizon, about 40 miles. There was recently an article that I came across in my news feed back in late October. It was on the Daily Mail website by a writer named Alex Hammer, who apparently used an article published in Popular Mechanics last May as his source. For me, this prompted a weird flood of memories about my own encounters with ghost radio back in the day. So what happened was I began traveling for the U.S. government back in the early 80s. I was on the road constantly, and a lot of that early travel was to Europe. And all of the hotel rooms in Europe had clock radios like you would find anywhere else. But they normally had like at least 3 bands. There was AM, FM, and then shortwave. Now, I'd never had a radio that had a shortwave receiver on it, so I would play around. And as I recall then, when you'd hit this frequency, the 4625, you'd get a series of beeps that almost sounded like Morse code. But I was traveling with a communicator then, a Navy guy who had been trained in Morse code, and we were doing all of our comms via satellite at the time, which was pretty advanced for, the early 80s. But he knew Morse code, and he said, "Nah, that's nothing. It's just random."
Yeah, it's not saying anything
right.
particular.
But I found that over time, because I did that up until I retired from Navy in 1997, what I found was any place you went overseas where there had these shortwave, receivers or shortwave band on their radios in the rooms, you could still find that. It was kind of weird, and in a weird sense, it was comforting, I think. And that's really hard to describe because it didn't make any sense. And I never heard any of the voice transmissions that they talk about getting now. And as I recall, I think we even found that in Europe, or not Europe. We even found that in Asia, if I'm not mistaken, which kind of makes sense because the Russians are, they're Central Europe, and so they can blast that crap all over the place, I guess. Anyway, that was my own personal experience. So when I saw this article in Daily Mail, I came running into Mikey's office and told her, "We got to do this because this is really cool. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories about what's really going on there." And she bought into it.
Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, radio has always been a passion of mine. I used to listen to it as a kid, and then my degree, I went into radio. So to me, it was fascinating. I was like, what?
Yeah. So the most common theory among experts is that the radio broadcast comes out of Russia, which you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out.
Especially with
they're speaking Russian.
Yeah, and then the names that they spit out are very Russian names too. So there's lots of things that point to them.
And they feel that they may be reserving that frequency for some sort of impending emergency. And the article quoted a Professor David Stupples, who is an expert in electronic and radio engineering at City University of London, who said that they may be just reserving the channel for air defense or some form of defense. So it may be that the Russians are driving a "hey, this is ours" stake in the ground on the belief that if they don't actually use it, someone else will poach it. The sound was first heard worldwide in 1982, and I think it would have been like 84 when I really came across it. But it is believed to have been broadcasting since either 1973 or 1976, depending on who you listen to. The fact that they were using the call sign UVB-76, it could be it was 1976. I remember it as, and I said this before, as a series of beeps rather than the buzzing tone we hear today. In the late 1980s, the broadcast got weirder and shifted to a series of buzzing noises around 25 times per minute, along with the occasional sound of a distant foghorn. In the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, more additions to the broadcast could be heard, including infrequent male and female voices that would regularly list names, words, or numbers, seemingly at random.
I don't feel like any of it's random.
Okay,
You know,
now that's very conspiracy theory.
See, I'm feeling very paranoid and conspiracy theoristy right now.
All of the voices had the same Russian accent and were generally accompanied by a series of tonal shifts that researchers feel could be some sort of code. Among the theories about the broadcast's actual purpose include that it is a dead man switch that triggers a nuclear attack on the West if the buzzing stops. Others believe that it is a homing beacon for UFOs or a mind control device with which the Russians can program your brain. The Russians, Putin is in your skull.
That sounds terrifying.
In the mid-1980s, there was speculation that it was a remote control station tied to the Chernobyl, thank you, nuclear power plant. The first voice transmissions were on Christmas Eve, 1997.
See, why Christmas Eve? And why 1997?
With one message identifying the station as UVB-76 and then saying the names Anna, Nikolai, Ivan, Tatiana, and Roman. A snippet of conversation between two people in Russian on November 3rd, 2001 seemed to point toward the broadcast origin as Russian. The exchange then said was, "I am 143, not receiving the generator. That stuff comes from the hardware room." While that seems innocuous enough, it confirmed for many researchers that the source of the buzzing was neither internal or pre-recorded, but rather an amplified sound caught by an always live or hot microphone nearby. After that exchange occurred, the buzzing sounds resumed, reigniting the air of mystery around the broadcast. The continuous broadcast remained uninterrupted for another 7.5 years before the station suddenly went silent on June 5th, 2010. And that 2010 date is an important one to remember.
And it happened for 24 hours?
For 24 hours.
So do you think there was a lot of people just losing their minds over because some of the conspiracy was that there was going to be an attack or something?
It was a dead man switch, and here comes the missiles.
What?
The
buzzes resumed
thereafter. And after a few months, the buzzing ceased again. This time, the sounds of footsteps shuffling and something being knocked down in the background could be heard in its place. A few days later, snippets of music began interrupting the buzzing. The song was Tchaikovsky's Dance of the Little Swans from Swan Lake. That seemed to add more speculation that the broadcast was coming from Russia. Then, in November of that same year, the broadcast, which changed its call sign to MDZHB, broadcast an apparent phone conversation, presumably by mistake. During the call, a male voice could be heard mentioning the brigade officer on duty and the communication code debut, before listing off the Russian words for clothes and volcano, which the Russian word for volcano, by the way, is Vulcan, just for whatever that's worth, which can also be used as names. The anonymous man also uttered the word Sudak, which could be referring to a town in Crimea by the same name, or an alternate name for Xander. A woman was then heard replying, "Officer of the duty station debut, Ensign Uspinskaya," and received a test call from not as understood. During the call, the buzzing sound could be heard faintly in the background, further suggesting the sound, which can still be heard today, is generated externally. The 2010 dates are significant because that coincides with the transmitter site just northwest of Moscow being moved to near the Western Russian border, close to St. Petersburg. In 2020, 13 coded messages were aired in a single day and 3 more just weeks later. In May 2020, broadcasts from unknown French-speaking persons who appeared to be fishermen were heard conversing, but much of what they said was undecipherable. The most recent interruptions to the buzzing sound occurred on May 4th, 2024, when an unknown Russian-speaking radio pirate, appeared to infiltrate the frequency, seemingly trying to contact the station during a lull in the buzzing. The person proceeded to pose a series of questions to the station, which, translated from Russian, read, "Can I tell a joke?" Sounds like one of our podcasts.
Oh, I know. That's what I was thinking when it said that. I was like, okay, Mr. Robin is Russian and
one buzz.
Or wait, yeah.
One
he
buzz
wants to
for
tell a
yes
joke.
or 2 for no. The station proceeded to let out 2 clear buzzes, leading the pirate to ask, "What for?" before asking if he could turn on music. Another 2 buzzes ensued, leading the trespasser to ask, "Why?" before inquiring whether it was okay that the station operators were answering his questions.
Next time you say, "Hey, Mikey, can I tell you a joke?" I'm going to go buzz.
Buzz.
I'm not going to do the second one.
I
No.
A day earlier, another pirate, possibly the same guy, had attempted to interfere with the buzzer's broadcast, after which they were met with immediate retaliation from an on-duty operator who began preventive measures to stop the incursion. And I presume that means they upped the power on their transmitter. The purpose of the station remains unknown, though most believe it is a government radio station that continuously emanates sound at a specific frequency in order to ensure it is never used by anyone else. The Russian government has never acknowledged or claimed it. And then I'm going to play just a couple of short little snippets that have been recorded and are now, you can find them on the internet.
Oh, okay. Somebody caught it, and then recorded it. Is it the people talking? I'm curious to hear that.
This one was recorded in January of 2013.
And he's like, "Those are the name of my prisoners."
Then here's one from August 2023. Different tone. Okay, it's upsetting my dog.
Luke's like, "What is that?" And make it stop. So maybe we're onto something with the Russians trying to make us all crazy.
Yeah.
It was starting to make the dog crazy.
So included in that article was kind of an interesting report from a Russian student. And I'll just go ahead and read this. I can't say this guy's name. The Russian student, who is 20, originally comes from Moscow, but now studies in Ottawa. He said in 2014 that he managed to track down the origin of the signal coming across the abandoned military base near Pskov, near the border with Estonia. So this would have been when they had moved it back to the west. He proceeded to photograph and explore the abandoned building. He's quoted as saying, "Like any abandoned building or area, it was very creepy." He said at the time, "Strange people and very strange scenery." He said he encountered a mid-40s woman who was pushing a stroller. At first, I thought she was a resident of the town out for a walk, but as she walked past, I saw that her stroller was empty, he said. Who goes to an abandoned military base with an empty stroller for a walk.
Weird.
Most of the buildings, some half underground, were destroyed or abandoned, according to the student, while cables in some areas had been visibly torn from the ground. We found tons of rubbish documents. One that we found was, interestingly enough, about ceasing operations of the base. The student said he thinks the station may be used for some form of internal communications that, quote, while secret, isn't sensitive enough for them to care about masking or keeping it secret, unquote. So, and then the entire article ends with, I think to find the whole truth and nothing but the truth, I think it would have to come from the Russian Federation themselves, and Mr. Robbins' take is they aren't going to do that.
No, they're not going to explain themselves. So you're saying that he traced the signal back to that abandoned...
Well, yeah, it's a little confusing when you read the article. What essentially happened was, because you remember I had mentioned that they moved from their position, they moved the transmission from near Moscow, I think it was like 6 miles northwest of Moscow, and moved it out near St. Petersburg, which is to the west. And then they abandoned, because there was another piece in there, sorry, I didn't read, that it had gone back to Moscow and was in what the Russians refer to as the military district of Moscow. So by the time the student got there, it had been moved out of that base near St. Petersburg back to
But he
Moscow.
was exploring that space still.
Right. But the woman pushing a stroller around without anything else.
She's a spy, a Soviet spy, and the stroller was just a decoy. Well, she should have put a fake baby in it and made it look realer than that, but whatever. A good spy would have done that.
Yeah.
So, or at least put a dog in there, cover it up, like have something.
So what do you think?
I think I have never been more paranoid in my life. I'm kidding. I really think it was interesting. I guess we shall see. But it makes sense to me that I'm using it for communication because, new technology, I mean, it didn't work like old technology, I guess, in a sense, where you have to have certain things all working together. Shortwave, it's kind of like ham radio. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
so if everything else went kaput, they would still be able to communicate on this line, and that's just what they're holding on to because the Russians are paranoid, right?
Oh, absolutely. And what you're hearing in the background now is coming live out of Russia. Putin, can you hear me?
I see a little fist coming out from your microphone punching you in the face. Oh, that's where my
and it's
goes.
kind of interesting if you're at all interested in like shortwave technology and listening in, because there are hundreds, probably thousands of shortwave stations throughout the world. You can buy and operate a receiver without any licensing. But if you're going to try to transmit, you got to have a license.
Mr. Robin, are you trying to brainwash the people on our podcast right now? Because I'm about to lose my mind listening to this bullarchy. Stop it, make it stop, please.
I played this the other day. I played that same stream at the museum. You were gone. You were at lunch or something. I was playing.
Oh, yeah.
And pretty soon Vicky comes in there. Vicky runs the gift shop at the museum. And she came in there and she looks at me and she goes, "What the hell are you doing?" And I said, "Well, it's
research."
It's yeah. And I said, "It's a shortwave broadcast coming out of Russia." And she said, "You speak Russian?"
She would ask that question. "You speak Russian?"
I said, "No." And she said, "Could you turn that down just a little bit?" Yeah, sure. Okay, we're going to wrap this one up. If you have any questions for Mikey or myself about
Direct them at Mr. Robin, because I'm not looking to have paranoid people be asking me about this right now.
or any other darn thing, you can email us at mr.robin@mrrobinshood.com.
Just email him.
Or Mikey at mrrobinshood.com.
I will forward.
You can find us and message us on Facebook at Mr. Robin's Hood Podcast,
which Robin runs, so he will get that message also.
As always, you can also reach out to Mikey or me via Podophone at 580-827-0472. Maybe you just want to get something off your chest, or you know something about the UFO homing signal being broadcast out of Russia. We want to know about it. You can leave us a voicemail or text us if you have a question, concern, complaint, compliment, suggestion, death threat, whatever. Just don't be a dick about it. As always, you can stream or download episodes of Mr. Robin's Hood Podcast wherever you usually find that sort of nonsense. We're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, and Podchaser. You can also stream them directly from our Podbean website at mrrobinshoodpodcast.podbean.com, and it's free. So we'll close for now, as we always do, by urging everyone to stay
hungry, stay foolish, but most of all, pay attention.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Freaks.
Don't be paranoid.